Hey tubers, welcome back for another adventure. What we have here is a free tractor. And right here we have a $40 motor. And what we're going to do is combine the two. I got to start cleaning up this mess, which means I better start putting a few things together, or I'm never going to have a clear driveway for the winter. Getting started with this project, where does one start? I plan on tilting it up on the back wheel. So the first place I'm going to start is getting the battery out of there, right? The last thing you want is the acid juice to run out the back, start corrosion and other problems. So we'll get the battery out. I'm going to stand her up, and then we'll start looking at bolts to see what comes out next. An engine swap isn't difficult. It's just loads and loads of nuts and bolts, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 gets the hood off. These two allowed the muffler to drop down, right? You want to get the wire off the starter. You want to get the electronics disconnected. You got to do the throttle right there. I got to do the gas hose. But there's a little fuel in the tank, and I don't want that running all over the ground. At this point, believe it or not, I'm only 5 bolts away from removing the engine, right? The 4 that hold it down, I need to get the pulley off, and I just need to drop the belts. Unfortunately, I'm discovering that this is a very heavy tractor, right? I took the hood off and I figured I'd be able to lift it, but this is one of those cast iron front ends, and that's a heavy motor. Even carrying the 16.5, it wasn't quite on the edge of my lift and carry range, but it wasn't far from it. So you got to figure there's the 16.5 plus some with that motor, plus that cast iron front end, the tires, and all the other trivia, including the deck, quite honestly, right? The pivot's all the way there. So I don't have quite enough oomph to lift it up like the old days. In the old days, when I was out scrapping and picking up stuff, loading it in the back of my old Datsun pickup truck. How's that for ancient history? I mean, back then I used to have them do the tail stand, back the truck up to them, drop the front end on the tailgate, lift the back and roll them in by myself. Maybe the tractors were smaller and lighter back then, but I'm not going to be able to do that with this. So I'm going to have to jack it up and impact those bolts off. Unfortunately, the way this plate is, the hole isn't big enough to slide it out, pulley and all. Success! The motor is off. 9/16 each one. Once they broke loose, it was relatively easy. 5/8 for the main bolt on the pulley. Once again, no big deal. Once it broke loose, it slid right down, right off. So there it is. I just need to clean up, get the pulley off the other engine, and drop her right in. This isn't going too bad. I really have no complaints. It would have been easier to stand it up and get the bolts out, because then I would have been working at face level instead of working on my knees, but one has to adapt to realities, I guess. Anyway, I gotta get the other pulley off, hopefully clean this up, drop the other motor in, and just start bolting it up. It's just a matter of nuts and bolts. Here's the pulley from the engine I removed from the tractor. Here's the pulley from the new engine. You could see the new engine pulley didn't drive the blades as fast. Bottom is for driving the blades, right? Top, though, for transporting the tractor. They're the same size. I'm going to stick with the pulley from the tractor, obviously. That way I don't have to fool with the belts, and spinning the blades a little faster is a good thing. Remember, when you're putting it on, you know, throw a little something on there to make sure it doesn't seize up, and clean the drive shaft so that there's no problems there. Drive shaft is clean. It's just a matter of sliding this right on. So I'm kind of coming up into the home stretch. The engine is bolted on. I just need to tighten it up a little bit. The pulley's on, the belt's on, the pulley bolt just needs to be tightened up, and I figured I would start looking at the engine to see what it would take to start. We know this starting this electronic fuel valve, solenoid, whatever you want to call it, isn't working, and I think you guys could see why. A monkey climbed in and took a poop. I did happen to look up carburetors on eBay, and it's the same carburetor from 16 up to 23. So I'm going to pull this carburetor off and smash on the one from the old motor there. That's why it's always handy, right? A lot of times you'll buy a tractor and the motor's already missing. Somebody pulled it off to replace, and you don't get the old motor. Then you're like, oh man, I could have used this, that, or the other thing. Now I have to go fetch it up or buy it. So instead of 21 horsepower, I'm going to have 16 and a half. You know, I lose 4.5 horsepower. I think that'll be trivial. I also consider this a little better engine than that guy. So I'm thinking this whole swap is going to be perfect. By the way, all the bolts worked out, the muffler worked out, everything worked out. So I got no complaints. The wiring might even work, who knows. But I just can't wait to hear this thing start and see it move. So, carburetor from the $40 motor, carburetor from the free motor on the free tractor, so to speak. They appear to be exactly the same, and obviously the free one looks a lot prettier than the other one. I think I'm just going to blast it out with some carburetor cleaner and put it in, and hopefully she's going to fire right up and things are going to be great. So many of you are familiar with the fuel turn-off solenoid. What happens is when you start the tractor, this pulls down, right? There's a coil in there, and magnet pulls it right down, and that allows fuel into the carburetor, fuel to flow through the carburetor, and the engine will start right up. Unfortunately, sometimes these hang up in the up position, so it behaves like your carburetor isn't getting any fuel, or they hang up in the down position. Then, given the size of the gas tank and the gravity feed, a lot of times your engine will flood out, and gasoline will go down the intake manifold, flood out the rings and so forth, and quite honestly, eventually dilute your oil down if it's just a little bit at a time, and you can end up throwing a rod because it'll keep looking like your oil's full, but you don't have real oil in there. You got half gas, half oil. And by the way, this thing was hung up just a little bit down, so that could have been what was going on with this engine. He didn't put a manual, or the engine that blew up, he didn't put a manual turn off on it. So that's a possibility. I'm going to put a quarter turn on this, right, because I don't want to blow up this engine. I'm going through all this trouble of putting it in. And I'm also going to leave the solenoid for anybody out there who wants to get rid of the solenoid valve but not leave a hole in your carburetor for all the fuel to leak off. You just pop off this little rubber stop, and it no longer allows turn off or hang up or any of that other stuff. By the way, some of these solenoids look like this, and they got one of these needle valve plungers. What you got to do is just grind these off careful not to damage threads or anything. And then it will no longer turn on and off, it'll just stay on. So the troubleshooting begins. If I give it a hoot of starting fluid, it'll start right up. I check this connector here and I have 12 volts, but as you plug and unplug this, you do not hear this click. So I'm gonna have to do the solenoid bypass. So I finished putting it together. I still have to use the jump pack, but it's idling away happily. Parking brakes on. What you hear is the belt just pinging up against the pulley there. Anyhow, I think it's time for a test ride. Let's see how she does. Well, let's take this thing for a ride, see what it's going to do. It's got a motor, but who says it didn't have a transaxle problem or a deck problem before I started on it? Okay, that's reverse.